world. If anyone has anything to share, please do. Robin, very welcome to see you. And yes, there's been quite a lot going on in Oxford.
Oh boy, there has. Oh boy, oh boy. Yes, shall I give you the ugly, the bad, and a little bit of good from Oxford?
Always good to have a bit of good in there as well.
Yes, I'll save that till last. So we had, as if you hadn't noticed, the descent into Oxford by anti-traffic filter protests, which of course weren't really about anti-traffic filters. It was there were some anti-traffic filter protesters who'd originally started as anti-LTN protesters, but they were by far outnumbered, I think, by people from an organisation called Together, who started off as anti-vax, and they're also anti-credit cards on the basis that you can be traced through a credit card, and they've got all kinds of right-wing links. And there's lots of stuff on the internet, and it all gets quite dark and misty. But as they went through our town, they did start off by showcasing our wonderfully pedestrianised Broad Street, which is of course protected by traffic filters, and they then demonstrated on how far you can get to the range of facilities that are in a 15-minute walk in our wonderful Oxford neighbourhood, and then they walked up Cowley Road, which they nicely turned into a low traffic neighbourhood, which was only navigable by pedestrians, cyclists, and a few police horses. So if you missed all this, then probably the best way to experience it is through Tom Seaward's Twitter feed. Tom is a journalist on the Oxford Mail, and he rides a bike. It's a Genesis, actually, so you'll tell he's actually a proper cyclist. Unfortunately, his bike got damaged while being stolen in the last week. Poor Tom. But he's not bad as a journalist goes, and I'll paste his Twitter feed up so you can scroll through it. Following that, it's been featured on the BBC Radio 4 Antisocial programme, which takes a social media topic and then with Adam Fleming has people on both sides of the argument. And they had one of the founders of Together, and they had the brilliant Carla Frankham, who was absolutely terrific about talking about the benefits of low traffic neighbourhoods. Unfortunately, she doesn't know Oxford too well and doesn't know kind of some of the false statistics that were spouted out by this guy. So she was unable to put him right on those. And so there were 5 lies smuggled through, which I've debunked on Twitter as best as I can. But Carla was brilliant at putting her points across. There's also Sky News covered it on the climate show that they have, and it was also on Broadcasting House on Sunday morning. So I'll put lots of stuff on that in the chat so you can follow all those links up. The Sky News climate show is a really good little mini documentary to watch that we'll be glad to see. So next piece of news, 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. So we had an interesting case of some that were due to be approved, about 5 different villages and large villages and towns. Decisions were postponed because the bus companies said that they would remove services. And in fact, the Oxford Bus Company landed the letter with a big list of services on the council's door the very day before the decision meeting. And despite the fact that these proposals have been going around for a couple of months. So they really, it was kind of, here's the services we'll remove. We've got the press release written. You approve these 20-mile-an-hour limits, and we're going to go out saying we'll remove these services and it's your fault. Boom. So not a great way of doing business. So the decisions have been postponed, and we've got I've been invited to a meeting on that next week, which should be fun. Talking through the data about how much 25 actual speed limits actually affect the buses, on which I have some because I've been carrying my Garmin around on a few buses. And the good news that I promised you is the LC whip for the town I live in, Abingdon, has been approved, which is great. It's a really good LC whip. Another LC whip has started, and another LC whip's just gone through its consultation. So Oxfordshire is really cracking through its LC whip, and also the a off-road cycle track between Abingdon and Oxford, which Abingdon's the closest market town to Oxford, that is going to be paid for by a housing developer, was also approved, and that's going to be a real game changer route when it's built. It's probably going to take another year and a half to get built, but the key approval has now gone through, and that is on its way.
Thanks, Robin. Two points. One, are you able to share that LC whip with anyone who'd like to see it, just as an example of a good one, if it is one?
Yes.
Could you post that in the chat? And secondly, just in terms of the is all the shenanigans that have been going on in Oxford, has that affected the political support at all, or are the politicians who've supported this still sort of standing firm? Is there any wavering going on? If you could keep the answer to that reasonably short, because we've got lots of people to get through.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the political support is very strong. We have a really good coalition, Lib Dem, Labour and Green. They're very strong. What it's actually done, it's made the opposers of it look like crazed right-wing loons. And the unfortunate effect is that it's meant that the legitimate concerns, so there are some legitimate disabled user concerns, carers and things like that, they're now much hidden in the background. And that's my worry, is that they're not being heard so much.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks. Well, I guess you don't have to be an opponent to be surfacing those. Let's hear from Beth and then Mark.
Hello. Yeah, very quickly from me, down in Poole/Bournemouth/Christchurch on the south coast. Good news was on Friday we opened our first ever indoor secure bike parking facility in Poole Town Centre, which is really good. That was a sort of joint venture between the council and the owners of the shopping centre, and it uses spoke safe technology. So giving those guys a go. All good so far. And the other good news was that yesterday we got a new school street as well. So that's
Brilliant.
it.
Yeah, we should have a good news, bad news. So there's two bits of good news. Mark, is your news good?
I was going to do good news and bad news. So
Okay.
Good news is that we're doing a lot of work. This is with my transport initiatives hat on. We're doing lots of work on bike share, and we've got an open day on Thursday in Guildford, where we're hoping to get things moving. And I'm also working in other places on that. And I'd be happy to talk on bike share with or without Como at a later date. The bad news is that we had the Brighton Hove City Council budget last Thursday, and Labour took £1 million out of the budget for the LTN, based almost entirely on the same sort of populist nonsense that we've heard in lots of other places. We don't need an LTN because it's low traffic in the area already, but we've got to be worried about the boundary roads because of the increase in traffic from the low traffic that will be cascaded. And so there is still money still there, but it's going to be a question of trying to work out what can be done with a very reduced budget. So the way to do it, rather than trying to stop it happening, is just to make it happen, but with no money. Their approach.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, and indeed, if anyone has a speaker idea that is themselves, you are entirely allowed to propose yourself, as long as you've got something good and interesting to talk about. Let's go Bob, and then Ailey, and then Tim. Bob, you're on mute.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot. Just a quickie on the conspiracists. I've been actually copying in the Community Safety Trust and the other anti-Semitism organisations, because the conspiracists do have a kind of nasty anti-Semitic element to them. Plus, on top of that, which I find very distasteful, is the way in which LTNs are compared with everything from North Korea through to the Holocaust. And in Oxford, a counsellor was accused of being like Dr. Mengele and that sort of thing. I think it's worthwhile calling that sort of stuff out. Further on culture wars, we've had the Mr. Dan Walker episode with the lid, and we've also got a very stupid survey out from the Institute of Advanced Motorists. Just a quickie on the Institute of Advanced Motorists survey. If you actually read through it a bit, it finds out that nearly 40% of their respondents thought that there should be an assumption of guilt in criminal cases of motorists being at fault where a cyclist or pedestrian is hit. Now, that's quite fantastically high, since it's a survey of motorists, and that actually is one of the things that was missed out. It's a very bad survey in many respects, but that's one little interesting detail which goes against the kind of thing that has been talked about in the last couple of days. All I wanted to say was that we have the words of Chris Boardman from when there was this nonsense about cyclists ought to have number plates some time ago, in which he said, look, don't worry about it. This is just the morons. Well, he didn't use that word, but that's what he meant. We know that a lot of people want to ride bikes, and we know a lot of people want to have road space reallocation. Let's just sort of ignore this and don't get into a culture war. And, I see the point and I agree with that in some ways, but what I think we've seen, both from the conspiracism around LTNs and the stuff about helmets, is that culture wars are in a way here to stay. They're going to be coming at us, and we need to know how to react. And one of the good things about the Dan Walker episode was that he was obviously very surprised to see that a lot of people were actually upset at the victim blaming narrative around bicycle crash helmets. And so while in one sense I'm upset and annoyed and fatigued and find it depressing that we have to go over all this all over again, and isn't it bloody dreadful, and we shouldn't have to do it. I'm also actually quite pleased that there are now a lot of people who aren't going to take the shit, and so that's it. Namely,
okay, thanks, Bob. Yeah, in terms of being prepared for the culture wars, we've got a future speaker lined up on disinformation, misinformation, so that would be really interesting. So Ailey, would you like to share?
Yes, thanks, Claire. I just want to give some good news, which is that a little bike ride, which the LCC was spearheading, and we thought we'd get probably about 200 people on it, has now reached over 1,000 registrations on Eventbrite. So we are quite gobsmacked by the response. We're really, really chuffed. This is going to be on Sunday next week. I'll put the Eventbrite link in the chat. And if anybody would like to come to London for a really uplifting bike ride with some pretty classy speakers, I have to say, at the beginning and the end, then please do come along. This is going to be the first of a few events which we're planning, and it's all about promoting women and other underrepresented communities on bikes. And we've got 3 asks of the mayor. So this is all stuff that we're going to be going through over the next few weeks and months. But if anybody wants a fabulous day out on Sunday, 5th of March, then sign up. I'll put the Eventbrite in the chat. You'd be very, very welcome.
Thanks, Ailey. Let's go Tim and then Simon.
Bad news, I'm afraid. Birmingham lost one of its crucial bike lanes this week. It's on the Nichelles Parkway. If you know Birmingham, it allows you to get to the east and north of the city. It was one of the installations during COVID, and the argument being put forward by the council, who didn't consult, didn't tell anybody until the diggers came in, but because they're resurfacing the road and can't afford to upgrade the lane, they're going to pull the lane out. It's a bi-directional cycleway on a dual carriageway where there's only enough motor traffic to actually have a single laned motorway. So we don't understand why this has happened. We've been assured that the plans to upgrade it remain in place, but I think there's a general point here about councils who need to understand that when they got funding to put something in, if they pull it out, then they jeopardise their Active Travel England funding. Clearly that's not understood.
Thanks, Tim. Let's go to the other Tim Morton. And then I think there's Maria wanted to come in. I can't see a hand up, Maria, but if you can come in after Tim Morton. Oh no, Tim, you put your hand down now.
Yeah, that's because I was going to speak and I knew I'd forget to take it down.
Okay, cool. You're next, and then let's go Maria, and then let's go Simon.
Okay, good, bad and indifferent news from Leicester. Good news is they submitted a £2 million Active Travel 4 bid on time on last week. Bad news is that the ride-on docked e-bike scheme sponsored by Santander but run out of Scotland, the parent company went bust last week, and we're losing our docks and our e-bikes and our scheme. Predictably in Leicester, it's all down to it wasn't used properly, it was vandalised, it was this, that and the other. Those aren't the actual facts. There's been a little bit of that, but it was growing in popularity. It's the parent company that's run out of cash and couldn't bring in any more investment. The other bit of bad news, I suppose, is that for those who don't know, Leicester is a very ancient Midlands-based city with a city mayor, unitary authority, elected Labour mayor, 3 Labour MPs, part-time, one of them, and 58 Labour councillors and 2 others, maybe 3 others these days. The Tories put a leaflet through my door this morning telling me that one of the big things they're going to improve my life with is by scrapping the pop-up bicycle lanes in Leicester. In the ward where the Labour Council scrapped the pop-up bike lane last year. So I'm not quite sure whether they're really on the course. If you want to come and visit our wonderful city, there's a Transforming Cities conference happening this month, 21st and 22nd of March at the Phoenix Arts Centre. And you'll be able to see vast amounts of street art, some of Ranty's amazing imagery from last week or the week before, and have a nice time in Leicester. Sadly, I'm working and won't be there. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Maria, would you like to come in now? Because I know you can't put your hand up in the chat, but I can see you there.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I live in Bicester, and I am speaking on behalf of the bike users group that we have here. So what we have is a new railway coming in, which is great. It will connect Milton Keynes and Oxford at this next year, and they have got some horrendous plans to close the main level crossing. So what they're proposing, or what they have consulted on, is either a road bridge or a road underpass, or one of these metal back and forth iron pedestrian bridges, which is pretty bad for disabled people, because most elderly or people who find it harder to walk wouldn't want to climb 3 stories, even on a ramp. So yeah, what we have proposed, and we have a petition going. I can share some images if that's okay. So yeah, we have a petition proposing a pedestrian underpass, like the kind of thing you see in the Netherlands. And this hasn't been consulted on, and we're really disappointed that wasn't even on the cards. But we're trying to speak to councillors and trying to put that proposal forward for proper consideration. So is it okay if I just share an image of that? And
absolutely,
yes,
you should be able to do that in the chat.
I think so. Yeah, I can share. I'll just share my screen for a minute. Yeah, so this is what we're hoping to get. That is right by Bicester Village train station. I can post a link to the petition as well. And this is what they are proposing. And that's obviously the cheapest option. And we're hoping not to get another one of those in Bicester.
Okay.
And yeah,
Thanks,
it would
Maria.
be really nice to liaise with Active Travel England about that if possible.
Thanks, Maria. H, I can see you waving your hand, but if you've got something for Maria, then just put it in the chat for her, because
well, I'd just say that about
no. Feel free to put that in the chat, H. Simon, Maria, if you could stop sharing your screen.
Yes.
Now, we're going to go to Simon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ailey's covered the bike ride, which is the big news. Slightly smaller news, and it's also on the LCC blog. Slightly smaller news is that the pathways stuff that I talked about here a few weeks ago is also now up there, as is the news about Westminster's first ever cycle tracks that we're consulting on. But what isn't up there yet is they're not the only one. So London seems to be gearing up for quite a major year of delivery, as I said a while ago. So we've got schemes going on extending C9 in Chiswick out further. We've got Redbridge working on some cycle tracks. We've got a whole bunch of other ones coming forward quite quickly now. So I think that kind of funding delay now seems to be a funding panic and get everything done.
Thanks, Simon. I think we're getting some chat through from your background. So yeah, if you've got more, please put it in the chat. Ruth.
Hi everyone, sorry I was late. I'm just back from an extraordinary weekend of cycling in Delft, where of course, as you all know, it's cycling nirvana. But I this afternoon had to cycle to Hammersmith Hospital. My news, I suppose, is negative news, because the problem is, unless it's signposted properly that there's a quiet way and the quiet way is properly numbered, it's impossible to get there. My blood pressure on arrival was twice what it normally is. And even I was scared, and I, as you all know, cycle a lot. The problem we have is connectivity. It really is. And I know you all know this, but it's something that Active Travel England do have to major on, because unless we connect the routes, we won't get utility cycling, and we won't get people to get to hospitals, for example, by bike rather than car, because people were complaining the lateness of the appointments and car parking charges. So it just is so important, and the cycling there was terrifying. I mean, I've done it all my life there, and so fast and so close and awful, really awful. Sorry to be negative, but it's true, and enhanced by having just had the glorious weekend of Delft. And I recommend you all go there. Don't go to Amsterdam, go to Delft, because that's where you'll really see how urban, suburban and rural cycling absolutely works. Thanks for letting me speak, Claire.
Great. I was just going to share a couple of things that I picked up from I was at the Transport for the North conference in Liverpool last week, where we heard from all the mayors of the North, but also Labour's Shadow Transport Secretary did a speech on the day that Keir Starmer also announced the 5 missions for Labour. So just a couple of headlines to pull out. One, that if it wasn't reported in the news, you may have missed it, although obviously Labour can say anything in opposition, but Labour say they are committed to building HS2 in full, which includes up to Leeds and also the station at Bradford, and also building Northern Powerhouse Rail. But also that they would enable any city or town to refranchise the buses in the same way that Manchester and Liverpool are. But more than that, they would overturn the Buses Act, or whatever it was called, that prevents any town or city from owning their transport company, so that local towns could actually own their bus companies as well. Bring them back into municipal ownership was the line. So that was really interesting. And also the mayors talking about their kind of wish list of powers. And interesting listening to Andy Burnham talking about, obviously we know what he's doing with buses, but bringing part of the commuter rail network under the kind of B network branding, starting with six train routes. He started to talk about something that I'd not heard him say before, the kind of concept of the sort of B network overground, mimicking the kind of London terminology there. So that was really interesting. So that was it from the transport conference that I went to. And a tiny piece of news from Manchester is that there's a new Kidical Mass launching in Manchester. So the first ride for that will be the 14th of February, if that's a weekend. So I'll put the link to that in the chat. Right, I'm going to make this the last contribution, Adam, and then we're going to go to Ranty.
Just to be aware that PERDA starts for probably half of you on the 24th of March, 6-week period. Officers like it. However, the end result of that is usually a brand new cabinet with a whole brand new set of promises that they've said they're going to do, and then we'll try their hardest not to do. Focus, if you are going to be dealing with this thing, is on the actual travel capability and ambition scoring that the highways authorities have to go through. It sets out a very specific leadership sort of tranche to go through. And then the other thing that people should be aware of is the levelling up bill is happening soon, springtime, I believe. When that goes through, the combined authorities, those with metro mayors, they will get authority over a lot of the A-road networks across multiple councils, highways authorities. However, how that is going to pan out, nobody knows yet. In theory, the mayor can sit there and say, remove all on-street parking on all your A roads, go. Whether or not that gets delivered. So that's just to be aware, though, everything changes for many people in about 6 weeks' time.
Thank you, Adam. And H, I think you had something for Maria, so do please share that in the chat. Ranty, are you with us, and would you like to take over?
Hello, I'm here. Let's share.
Let's pin you.
Okay, are we all seeing that? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, unfortunately, I should probably have done curbs tonight because this presentation's a bit shorter, but gives us a bit of a chance to have a moan and a whinge about the bad thing tonight. I don't think I've done many bad presentations, so let's look at some bad stuff. And I'm going to have a go at Toucan crossings tonight because I've had enough of them, frankly. Here's your Warden Forest klaxon, something bad in Warden Forest, which is always good to temper things with. But we'll explore why I think Toucan crossings are terrible. So let's have a look at the quick bit of history. So the name comes from a weird contraction of Toucan cross at once. And the image on the right is from the old local transport note 2 of 95, which told us how to design pedestrian crossings. So therefore, Toucan crossings are just pedestrian crossings that we've bolted cycling onto into shared space, as has been the case for many, many years. Nowadays, instead of LTN 295, they're covered in Chapter 6 of the Traffic Signs Manual. The Green Book, they are very familiar with red L-shaped tactile paving. So again, more pedestrian type infrastructure. Flush drop curbs are a must, as with all pedestrian crossings. We provide push buttons in pairs, and you'll see an example of that in a second, and we can put them on humps. So a bit of pedestrian infrastructure that we've bolted cycling onto. For those awake, how many birds does it take to change a bulb? Well, 2 can change a bulb, can't they? So here's 2 examples of signals for Toucan crossings. The left is far side signals, which is what I personally prefer. To the right is near side. So the bottom image is the push button with the green man and green bikes on there. The top is a repeater that you can actually have up the pole. Because the problem near side signals is people standing in the way block the view of the signals. Drivers see the usual sequence that you would see at any other signalised junction. And importantly, people walking, wheeling, and cycling do not have to obey these signals. So red means you probably don't want to cross, green means you can cross with care, essentially. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. So this is probably the only situation where near side signals are useful. It's a two-stage split or non-staggered crossing with near side display. So you can see in the crossing over in the distance, the pair of push buttons. The one on the right to the screen is where the push button is. The one to the left is just a supplementary push button. And the idea of that is because the crossings are a lot wider than normal, it just depends where people arrive at the crossing point. Near side, you can see the red bike, red man, and then underneath the unlit green bike, green man. And the reason those are near side is so you don't see all the way through the crossing and actually pick up the wrong signals. So they do have some value in certain situations, but I would say very limited. So what's wrong with Toucan crossings? Let's just pause for a minute and laugh at Kent County Council for getting things completely wrong, adding near side and far side signals to this instruction booklet, which I think when they tweeted it, they very, very quickly deleted it. So the problem with Toucan crossings is I can't quite put my finger on it, quite literally. So this is a photograph of me trying to use my first example from the seat of my cargo bike. And the only way I can actually go and press that button is to get off my bike or to stick the box out in the live traffic lane. And this is a fundamental problem with Toucan crossings. Let's look from the side. So same crossing again. Front of the trike is right up against the curb line. So from a seated position, there's absolutely no way I can reach that push button. And if you have somebody who cannot dismount, they're kind of a bit stuck. So they have to put themselves at some danger or some awkward angle to actually get at that push button. Same thing with the smaller bike. So probably can just about reach it, but the front tire is getting very close to the carriageway there. Of course, you don't always, so that's approaching it, I guess, straight on. You don't always do that. You can approach at an angle sometimes. So at least with that angle, you can have half a chance of reaching the button. And as is the case with lots of these things, if one group of people can't cope with something or access something, there's other people. So mobility scooter users, especially the bigger mobility scooters, will have the same problem as this type of arrangement. So there's a few more examples. So here is a push button where you can kind of get close to the push button there. This is on the Greenway in East London. This is a really good fun crossing. So you come out the side road, have to swing onto the path, press the button, get across. You get a stagger as well to use a second crossing. And there's a nice little picture there to show you how you get through that particular junction. But again, you've still got to try and get close into these buttons all the time. So it's very, very awkward for cycle users. Another example, route goes off into the park beyond. You've got all this timber work, and again, you just can't get up to the push buttons. And here's a really, really good example, or bad example, of a badly done Toucan crossing. Again, you've got this whole issue of being able to get around that corner to press a button. There's limited space. The reason you've got this absolutely massive post is there's a mast arm across the road with a signal out of view. A staggered crossing here. Again, it's a Toucan, so two Toucan crossings. To use this on the trike, you have to go around the corner, do a sharp right, do a very sharp right to get onto the island, then a sharp left to get across. This particular location, I will just watch the traffic lights and go round the outside that island and back in again, which you can do sometimes if you know the sequence. But again, you've got this whole problem of not being able to reach the button. So what is the solution if you can't reach the button? Well, carry a toddler with you at all times. So I think we really should be trying to consign Toucan crossings to history and try and go with something a bit better. And there we go, a quick run round terrible Toucans.
Thank you, Mark. And does anyone want to come in on any points about Toucans? Ruth?
Brilliant, Mark. Always think of you when I think of these. And as you are Dutch, do you know why we can't have those hip height poles that they have everywhere in Holland, which means you don't even have to start going down the slope if there are slopes, and people can use them walking, wheeling, cycling, children, everybody? Why can't we have those?
I've asked signal engineers why we can't have extra posts set further back from the crossing, and I've never, ever had an answer why not. The thing with signal engineers, they say, oh, the regulations say you can't do X. And all the questions, including that one, they have never been able to point at it. So if you're going to, I mean, I don't think actually, in theory, if it's a rural situation and it's a shared path, it's probably okay. But yes, let's have that extra third push button set back from the crossing, back of the path or whatever. It's a nightmare.
It also gives you, sorry, it also gives you the chance to start wheeling before
Exactly.
you start crossing, so you get across quicker. Sorry,
Yeah.
Claire, but maybe it's something we all need to campaign, Active Travel England to campaign about.
Yes, yeah.
Mark, can't see you on video, but I've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, my computer or my Zoom crashed and I had to switch to browser based. One of the problems with Toucans is the fact that even if you've got separated paths leading up to a crossing, they then merge for that small area and then merge across and then they demerge again. So they get rid of the separation that was there. And is that an issue that can be addressed, Mark?
I mean, I would say if you had it separated on the approach, why can't we have them separated through the crossing and run a parallel? There are situations where you've probably got tight space. I can think of a few in Cambridge, Birmingham, all over London. So you've got maybe 4 metre wide paths. So it's not always easy to deal with. But we should be trying at the very least. So if you've got a cycle track running to a crossing point, at the very least you can then use detection actually within the track, if not on a pointing down indicator.
You've been to Valley Garden.
Oh, Valley Garden, that's a great example. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it just feels like a bodge, doesn't it? If you're going from separate to a shared crossing, it feels like a bodge.
Mark, you've mentioned detection there. Can you just address why there isn't more automatic detection? And best use of the word conniptions goes to Tim in the chat. So presumably automatic detection would lead to safer solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I've put in crossings which have walking and cycling space right next to each other, but parallel crossings. Detectors looking down at the cycle side of it, and it works absolutely fine. I don't know why we can't do it. The kit's there, it's very sophisticated. If it's looking down at the crossing point, you can blank off areas where pedestrians might set it off if you want that separation. So yeah, I don't get it. More detection.
May have been Mark Mark Strong in the chat said it was too expensive. Like, so what sort of cost would something like that be?
I couldn't tell you what the individual units cost, but if you've got a project like that, I can't see how it's much more expensive these days. I mean, if you put detection in plus a push button, that's obviously extra money, but do both. If you get detected, the wait button lights up. So at least you know you've been detected.
Good point.
Yeah.
Shane and then Robert.
It's kind of the reverse question. Because some installations have detectors which cancel the light if you've stepped away from the button because you've crossed the road. And what happens if you're on a cargo bike and you press the button and then you sit back on your cargo bike?
The very first example does exactly that. And I've sat there thinking, why is it taking me so long to cross?
Right.
And then I've realized it's cancelled the demand. Okay. The newer detectors will detect heat a lot better. So even if you're sitting there, as long as you get given a bit of heat off, it will detect you. But yes, it's a good point.
Right. Thanks, Mark.
Robert and then Martin.
My question was around the detection.
You're very quiet, Robert. I don't know if we can get you a bit nearer the mic.
Can you hear me now? I'm wondering more about the issue of detection. There's one detector in Newcastle that works perfectly every single time, and it's an in-ground detector. All the rest of them are infrared on top of the post, and they're so unreliable. I have a cargo bike like you, well, it's a long john, so it's even worse trying to get across some of the settings. They just don't detect us at all.
Yeah, I think infrared is probably getting a bit old hat. There is some stuff which the last time I ever asked about it was it's come from military applications, and we can't tell you too much about how it all works. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, the detectors, the modern stuff these days, and I guess it might be a reflection of local signal engineers, customer practice, budgets as well would come into it. But certainly the detection I'm used to in London seems to be very, very reliable, and that's above ground usually. So that's up on the signal assembly looking down at the approach. I probably need to polish up on my detector knowledge, but yeah, the new stuff is a lot cleverer.
Martin.
Yeah, just to say that we've got various crossings in Cambridge that use detector loops at toucans and parallels. I don't remember even in 15 years any single time that I've been told that they're not that the cost problem is a significant issue, and they work fine. There's, you know, most crossings, I think, I don't remember ever having to press a button. It just seems to be the standard approach. I've put a few examples in the chat.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, I think where I'm coming from is places like Manchester have this, you know, hierarchy of users, and pedestrians are meant to be at the top. So my point is that we don't expect drivers to get out of their car and push the traffic lights. So why are we expecting pedestrians to push buttons at pedestrian crossings, particularly in busy junctions where it can presumably be monitored that and expected that there will be a high flow of pedestrians there. So I don't know, it's a slightly different way of asking the same question, Mark, but why isn't this just a default approach that crossings work like this? Sort it out, Mark. No.
Yeah, I mean, with standalone crossings, you can, and we have those that rest on green for peds and cycles, depending on where it is. I guess the flip side is if you've got a really busy A road or really busy traffic route, there will be a balance there somewhere. That's how life works. So if you're always reverting back to green, then you're probably going to have a lot more congestion, stop start, that kind of thing. So that's where the signal engineers will look at the balance. Junctions is even more complicated because you're often looking at networks. So when you're standing there at a junction waiting to cross, you're not always governed by what's happening at that junction. You might be governed by something happening 2 or 3 junctions up the road. Who you prioritise and how you prioritise is often political as well. You can take capacity out of the wider system and favour walking and cycling in that way. You can use, I mean, increasingly we're starting to see even cleverer detection. So people can walk up to a crossing and not even have to touch anything. The crossing picks them up. The problem with walking on that is often lots of people are walking past a crossing, so they're getting picked up. And unless the demand is registered kind of constantly for a few seconds, you end up confusing the junction, if that makes sense. So where you've got people crossing and it's absolutely obvious that's the route they're taking, you can probably work a little bit smarter with that. So there are people who say, yeah, we shouldn't have beg buttons at all. Everything should default on green, but I would say it's never as simple as that. I think we probably need both, because sometimes people like the comfort of actually seeing a thing lit up that they've been registered. Yes, I'm seeing a couple of bits popping up in the chat about Netherlands. Their signalling is even cleverer, but the cleverer it gets, the more you've got to go wrong. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Robert, is your hand an old one, or is that a new point? Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Mark. Someone suggesting the chat debate night, quite like that idea, where we have someone proposing why all pedestrian crossings should be detection only, and someone suggesting why that's a bad idea, that sort of thing. Yeah, more of those sorts of ideas. We don't just have to have single issue speakers. But on that subject, it would be good to just spend the last few minutes getting your thoughts on future speakers. And there's been quite a lot of chat through the event, through the session tonight, but I will ask Roxanne to summarise perhaps some of the suggestions so far, and then let's just have a few minutes discussion about it.
Thank you, Claire. And do let me know if I've missed any of your suggestions. As always, the chat is very busy. So in no particular order, here is what we have. Xavier Bryce, the CEO of Sustrans, several requests for updates on the Paths for Everyone project, and also updates from the recent strategy refresh at Sustrans, which should have a stronger focus on reduction of motor vehicle traffic. We've also had a request for Andy Cox. He has spoken before, and he was CamCycle's guest speaker at our AGM in January, but he has moved on to a new role, so perhaps it's timely to get him in with his final word on traffic policing before he maybe starts to forget it. We have had a case study from, now bear with me and my Australianness, Vista? Am I doing that right? Yes, thank you. A case study from Vista about the efforts to keep a level crossing open to people walking and cycling with an incoming new railway. So I'd be interested to hear about how you're getting on with that. We've had a request from a Twitter, someone influential on Twitter, Dr. Malcolm Morgan, who is a brilliant researcher who has plenty to say of the decarbonisation of transport. Abingdon councillors and their trials and tribulations of the LC Whip, which I'm sure many people would be able to relate to. The Black Cyclist Network, Pedal Me, Joy Riders, Pedal on Parliament, Como UK, which I think is about shared mobility. Let me know if I'm wrong there. Then we've got, wasn't a request for a speaker, but there was quite a lot of discussion about SpokeSafe, and I haven't actually heard of SpokeSafe before. So if we've not had them as a speaker, does anyone know who we might be able to contact at SpokeSafe? Because seemed there was quite a bit there. Yes, Beth B, thank you. If you could put an email address for you in the chat, you can do a private message to me. We'll follow up with you. Then there was a mention of a urban transport group webinar taking place this week or next about diversity and inclusion. So if someone's attending that, perhaps you could see if there's a speaker there that we might be able to bring in. We also had a request for a session about helmets. Oh, please, not a debate session for that one. But CamCycle in Cambridge had a really interesting speaker that touched on this issue a few years ago, and perhaps we could invite them. And that is Professor David Spiegelhalter, who is the chair of the Winton Centre for Risk and Evidence Communication in the Centre for Mathematical Sciences at Cambridge. So perhaps we could look at some of the statistics and the evidence that we've got around helmets, if Professor Spiegelhalter would be willing to come and talk to us. There was some chat about cycle theft and if we want to hear from Cambridge again or not, but Cambridge has halved our cycle theft rates from 2019 to now. So if that's interesting, I could find some people who might be able to come and talk about how we managed to do that in Cambridge. And then there was the mention of debate night and issues that we could talk about on that. So if you've got ideas for debates, perhaps send an email now, because the chat, I might not get all your other ideas. That is it so far on speaker suggestions. Keep it coming.
Yeah, I think so. It's quite handy if people have specific suggestions of names, but also not everything's that straightforward, is it? So if there's an emerging topic that you think is interesting, for instance, the sort of misinformation topic was something where I kind of thought, well, that's the subject, and then I found a speaker. So we do rely on your suggestions. This is all volunteer run, so if you have a good idea for a speaker, or if you've got a hot topic that you think we really should cover and can do a little bit of research to suggest a speaker, that is also extremely welcome. The best way to take that forward, if we finish up tonight and then a brilliant idea occurs to you, please do email us at activetravelcafe@gmail.com. And I think we will probably leave it there for tonight, unless in the act of Roxanne sharing all of those ideas with us, anything popped into anyone's head or anyone would like to reflect on all of that. Top of anyone's list, anyone who would like to, of the list that Roxanne shared, anyone like to say what their top request would be? Adam?
It was Sustrans, they kind of culled their network, and then they started working on accessibility around, getting rid of the bollards and all that type of stuff. But it'd be really interesting to see what problems they're coming up against, etc. Yeah.
It's interesting. Sustrans have also definitely taken are going to take a much firmer campaigning tack in terms of politically kind of pushing for change. So that's interesting, and it'd be good to hear, as you say, from the top on that. Bob?
Yes, it's Andy Cox hasn't been working on traffic in Lincolnshire, and he isn't going to be in a designated traffic post in London, but he still has an interest in traffic. He's on one of the national policing committees to do with I think it's third-party reporting, and crash investigation as well. But I will be meeting with him anyway when he comes back to London. So he's still around. He's still got a commitment. He does the Andy Cox Challenge, which is a run which he does to do publicity and raise money for road peace.
Yeah, I think it'd almost be as interesting to hear from him in his new role, because obviously a lot of this is how it affects all of policing. Rachel?
So it's just occurred to me lately, without women, teenage girls, etc., and a massive push on that area, we're just never going to change things in this country. So I just wondered if there's an expert in that field at all.
The field being how
do we get teenage girls and women cycling more across the country? Because whenever you look at the pictures of London, when you look at the pictures of people cycling, typically in this country, it tends to be a lot of men and not very many women, and you very, very rarely see teenage girls for everyday journey. So I just wonder, is there anybody that can help us around the country to focus on those groups, and what sorts of things should we be doing? Yeah, so I don't think we've got loads of brilliant campaigners across the country, but without that massive shift in women cycling, we're never going to see change here. Just being blunt, it's just occurred to me lately. That's where we are in this country. Without that massive shift, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I suppose it's all about creating the conditions for change. So what are those conditions? A lot of those conditions.
Yeah, but it's image. It's safety and image, isn't it?
Well, I think perhaps what you're saying is that you'd like to hear from someone who can talk about what those conditions are.
Yeah, and I'm not sure who. Yeah, okay. Well, let me dig around as well and see.
That would be great, Rachel. I mean, it's all about making suggestions, and everyone's heard you there, so hopefully people can pick Simon in the chat.
Thank you.
Right, okay, well, we are 2 minutes before 6. I think I'm going to bring it to Jim, sorry, I didn't see you there. Do you want to just make a final point before we finish up?
Yeah, it's actually Jill coming in.
Jill.
On I'm coming from work. Yeah, I'm the teenage girls thing. As somebody who borrowed my brother's bike to become a cyclist as a teenage girl, I'm passionate about this. Emily Cherry, CEO of Bikeability, spoke at an event we did in Stevenage on Saturday, and she's doing an NEU event for me this Saturday, and she's absolutely brilliant on that topic. She's brilliant anyway. She would be absolutely brilliant on teenage girls and the like.
Brilliant, Jill / Jim. We are in discussion with Emily about coming on, but we haven't got a date for her yet, but hopefully we will. So great.
I'll encourage her on Saturday.
Okay, yes, thank you. Let her know we are good.
Yeah, thank you.
That sounds good. Sitting very still.
Right. Okay, well, I think we will leave it there for this week. So thank you, everyone, for coming along. Could any of the wing people remind me who we've got next week? Roxy, Sally, Steve?
We've got Adam Reynolds next week, who is going to talk about online campaigning tools. We're going to have a couple of weeks where we've got people coming and talking about campaigning. We thought that might be really useful in the run-up to the elections.
Yes, with a month to go before PERDA, we've got a bit of a campaigning focus. So Adam has got a number of really good tools that he's going to share with us, and in the weeks after that we're also going to hear from some campaigners talking about election tactics that they've used successfully. So yeah, we've got a few weeks to hopefully help arm people with some good ideas on that. Okay, well, thank you everyone for contributing tonight. We've definitely got some good speakers, but as I said, if you've got a good name, please just email us and say, here's a good idea, shall I contact them, or give us the contact and we can do that. Please don't leave it all to us, because we are a community and we are all volunteers. So thanks very much. And no, Mark, I won't call it Purdah. Apologies for that. Thanks everyone for coming, and see you next time.